Once again, my circumstances haven't at all clearly improved whatsoever. Well, I wasn't murdered or arrested after showing my face on this podcast. At least not yet. So, I guess that's something that should at least serve as some degree of evidence to people that I really am an extremely powerful world leader and being extremely authentic on this podcast. But I'm still being left out in the cold and starving, having to eat out of the garbage, and seriously worried I'll randomly get shot or stabbed or sexually assaulted or robbed or somehow else harmed as I have to sleep on the streets and hope I'm not at the wrong place at the wrong time, despite not having any addictions or bad habits and not actually having betrayed or backstabbed or wronged anyone to be left in this extremely brutal kind of state in life. Granted, I've been homeless for much of my life by now, and I haven't done anything that gives me any particularly good reason to believe anything particularly bad will happen to me, especially given that I've managed to survive this long without such things happening. But technically, the danger or risk is very much actually there, and further, the fact remains that even if really horrible, even worse things don't actively come into my life than how it already is, even just the same kinds of extremely brutal circumstances I face continuing is already extremely undeserved and obviously unwanted by me and will remain extremely brutal to have to deal with. And it's only going to become more brutal as the weather gets colder and I get more angry the more I'm being blatantly, unapologetically, publicly disrespected and neglected and forced to deal with what is an increasingly insane situation in the absolute worst possible way. I still haven't been contacted by Kimmy and still see no good reason to believe she's at all serious about having desire, intent, and willingness to do so in any kind of actually reasonably timely and therefore actually meaningful and useful manner. If I don't get contacted directly by Kimmy in the very near future after releasing this release on my podcast, I guess I'm just going to have to continue working on my next release that I've already done a huge chunk of, going in even harder on exposing all the lies that have been getting reported about me behind the scenes. Assuming I hopefully don't get randomly, unjustly, non-consensually arrested and or murdered, I'll just have to keep releasing more stuff side by side as I work on video game development to prepare for all-out war to the literal death escalating between me and Kimmy and all of her associates. Still, I thought about things like I do, and I decided I'm going to try one more time to give people a chance to act like actually decent people to me before I become seriously convinced that anyone ever at all significantly close to me only really ever wants to prove to me that they're actually genuinely the most absolutely awful beings I ever could have been cursed with the misfortune of ever deciding to be at all close to, and in reality never deserved any of my love ever, and instead deserved to have the absolute worst things happen to them for what they did to me. So instead of going off tearing apart a bunch of stuff Kimmy and Jamie and others said and did publicly like usual, I decided to try at least a bit of a more gentle approach this time to see if it makes a difference. especially since I noticed public behavior that suggests it's maybe possible it will. So I might as well entertain the possibility one very last time before deciding the most brutal, vicious war in history is really final and there's nothing left but an extremely dark and destructive future ahead for humanity. Let the record show that I'm well aware that one of the techniques used by corrupt judges and court clerks is to do nothing with filings. Most relevantly, if, for example, the affidavit I provided in my last release on this podcast was not included in any potential currently open case pressing any kind of criminal charges against me, especially but not limited to charges placed as a result of the initial set of charges, I was unlawfully coerced under duress of indefinite wrongful detainment to plead guilty to and received a ridiculous probation that essentially attempted to enforce on me to never adequately defend myself from the massive smear campaign that people trying to destroy my life were doing for years that led to those ridiculous charges in the first place. I certainly see reason to believe that were I to have to attend court in person even after filing an affidavit like I did in my last release, it might not appear on the docket or generally that it would just disappear somehow from the case file. I want it to be known that I'm well aware that if anyone interferes with the docketing of documents, that is a crime of obstruction of justice. Each document concealed, destroyed, or not properly forwarded is a violation of law and can result in fines and or jail time for anyone involved in doing such things or even attempting to do such things. They can also lose positions of authority they might hold that they abused if engaged in such corrupt behavior. Due to the multiple different SMTP servers I've used to send emails to my mailing list from, to my knowledge, at least one of the people on my mailing list are forwarding emails I send to my mailing list to actual police officers, specifically ones, at least at one point in time, in charge of dealing somehow with the initial charges I had placed on me. At least one or more. This means that all the evidence I'm submitting and everything I post to this podcast, including but not limited to the affidavit I provided in my last release, is most likely being sent directly to the police, meaning any police officer relevant to my case receiving such documents and not submitting it to the court in filings to add to the case is technically committing a crime of obstruction of justice and can and should be fined and or incarcerated for such actions and likely also lose their job. Further, if any clerks or judges involved neglect to take proper care of ensuring such documents are properly retained within the case files, they are also committing crimes and can and should be fined and or incarcerated and likely also lose their job. I don't, never did, and never will want, need, or have any willingness to tolerate any kind or amount of validation from Kimmy or anyone or anything else to at all pursue and or embrace any kind of romantic and or sexual relationship with Hyun, Jessica, or anyone else that isn't Kimmy. I'm not trying to pettily hate on anyone in saying this. I'm not trying to call anyone ugly, but I've expressed my feelings in this regard extremely clearly multiple times on this podcast already, and there's absolutely no real evidence to suggest I've been at all insincere. I'm not saying this as an insult or to be mean or cruel. I'm simply saying the truth, and it really doesn't matter whether you like it or not because it's never changing, for better or worse. Again, I absolutely mean everything I'm saying as the words mean on the surface and absolutely with no hidden or alternate meanings or intentions or purpose. I know that looking at the situation, I'm definitely not in a ridiculous situation where I absolutely have to compromise my integrity out of some kind of leverage anyone has over me. Nobody has leverage over me. Nobody can force me to have to pick to date anyone besides Kimmy. Not now, not later, not ever. Anyone at all attempting to communicate otherwise is lying. And if they seriously believe they aren't lying, then they're actually just extremely delusional. There's nobody in my life that I consider nurtures me or provides me with any meaningful or useful guidance. Not Hyun, not Jessica, not Celine, not Kimmy, not Jamie, not anyone else of Kimmy's associates or anyone else that has ever been in my life, for that matter, male or female. I've seen extremely strange things in my energy suggesting there are extremely false narratives being purported behind the scenes that such a person exists, and I simply don't want to tell them right now that they have such an impact, but that I'm working on improving my finances in order to ultimately compromise my integrity to be somehow romantically and or sexually involved with them. If any such lies exist, and people don't immediately start extremely seriously respecting that they're nothing more than complete lies that are not, never have been, and never will be true, let the record show I'll be pressing charges against any and all such people for conspiracy to murder as well. I've actually noticed multiple times randomly that Hyun seems to be trying to say things on her stream where it's like she's trying to be deep or insightful or inspiring or something like that, as if perhaps she's doing something useful or beneficial to me, when in reality she's never saying anything that actually is meaningful new information to me or inspires me or benefits me at all, and only actually upsets me to see her attempt to validate extremely false narratives that I see her as the love of my life, that whatever massive fraud I've already exposed with that completely fraudulent criminal impersonation Twitter account I addressed in the 24th release of this podcast attempted to massively misrepresent me with. I really don't feel the need to present tons of clips as evidence for this, because it's rather devious and I'd just look like I'm disingenuously obsessed with her if I cared enough to do such a thing anyways. But, just take a look at this one clip from something Hyun did not that long ago. I never talk in her Twitch chat, so she was responding to some random other person I don't know. But the false narratives being pushed through her taking the opportunity to address things other people say and use that as if to indirectly be influencing me remains, whether or not she's intentionally doing it to achieve such a purpose.
It's just banter. But if I ever hurt your feelings, you guys can tell me. It's okay to open up and say, hey, you know what? I didn't like that. And I'll be like, that's okay, then I won't say that again to you. Compress the emotions. Well, then if you compress your emotions, then you're not gonna be able to, healthily communicate it. Therefore, you'll never be happy. Because you won't be able to express yourself. Nope. I'm happy compressing. You think that for now, but later on, when you really sit down and think about it, you're gonna be like, man. That is a problem for future me. And then future me is gonna think, wow, past me really sucked for doing this.
Are you serious? Is this supposed to be deep and insightful and inspiring to me or something? Does anyone seriously believe someone as smart, strong-willed, independent, and powerful as me really needs such basic advice as some kind of guidance or encouragement from a random Twitch streamer that plays games and yaps about random things while she's probably high on cocaine and who knows what else for a living? Don't think I don't know why Hyun's nose is seemingly always running every time I've ever checked in on her streams and watched the first few minutes to see what she says. I'm not an idiot. She doesn't perpetually have a cold or randomly runny nose. Even just watching a little bit of her streams makes me so uncomfortable, and not in a good way. A visibly seemingly concerned and distressed, literally verbally expressed gulp multiple times, seconds apart? Why does she seem like she's being threatened or coerced to say these kinds of things? Why does it seem like Hyun is extremely deviously trying to act like I'm being assertive about my feelings for Kimmy as some kind of extremely cruel, disingenuous, messed up pressure to make Hyun reluctantly resign herself to accepting ultimately receiving feelings from me that she herself blatantly seems extremely unsure about and largely in reality undesiring of? Or even if she really desires them, expressing it in such a shady way? Isn't it obvious she was being lied to extremely badly if she ever thought I was pursuing her? And if she ever even had a chance to try to gain my affection, she threw it away to chase thrill and believe she's too good to communicate with me properly in any kind of reasonable circumstances for her to be pursuing me? I certainly have plenty of reason to suspect people are trying to pull strings behind the scenes, and this isn't necessarily something Hyun's doing with just complete malice towards me herself. But either way, people are really trying hard to make me look like a villain here, huh? You think I don't know what kind of image people are trying to paint of me to try to leave me suffering how I am right now? Really? I didn't try hard enough? I wasn't understanding enough? I'm the one who abandoned people? Trying to rewrite history to paint themselves as the hero or the victim, when they were the ones holding the matches, lighting the fire that burned everything down and any chance for a healthy connection between us? People do it so convincingly, spinning their web of lies so intricately, so seemingly perfectly, that others are so inclined to question reality and doubt what I'm saying, even when the evidence is so clear for all to see. People know the damage they caused. People know how they used my genuine kindness and generally warm and gentle nature against me. Now, when all the lies and manipulations start unraveling, people are panicking because they're terrified that others will see them for who they really are. So they're trying to go on the offensive against me. I've went to great lengths to demonstrate the extent of extremely devious abuse Jamie has been inflicting on my life in several releases on this podcast. Pretty recently, Jamie posted this Instagram story with what I consider to be various rather concerning, extremely devious implications that only further my suspicions of the kinds of extremely false narratives I've been talking about. Jamie, Hyun, and Arya are all winking. Coincidence? I don't think so. It's as if some kind of silent agreement exists in them taking that picture. Certainly not something I'm consenting to. Look at how Hyun has a clock in her hand too, as if to be trying to send a message like it's only a matter of time. I do not, never have, and never will consider Hyun, Jamie, Emaine, or Arya my girlfriend, soulmate, love of my life, life partner, mistress, wife, or any other romantic and or sexually involved role or title in my life. Neither Jamie nor anyone else is ever stealing my girlfriend if they date any of these women. I literally couldn't care less who any of those women date or marry or are at all romantically and or sexually involved with to any capacity at any point in time for any reason, as long as it's not Kimmy. Nobody has ever had any actually good reason to believe otherwise. I really don't know what people are so delusionally hallucinating they're going to achieve as any kind of good for themselves or anyone else by continuing to report such extremely obviously, blatantly, thoroughly, irrefutably false narratives about me. I'm certainly never going to randomly start acting like a moron and trying to flirt with them or compromise my integrity out of anger. If so many years already of me so extremely clearly demonstrating that aren't enough for people to see it, they seriously have issues, and that's not my problem. That most certainly does not mean I'm attracted to men. There's absolutely zero real evidence whatsoever that I ever have or ever would date men. My complicated identity as female clearly is not intended to imply I have any attraction to men. I've stated repeatedly that I'm extremely, very much lesbian and extremely, completely confident that I am, always have been, and always will be exclusively attracted to very much female-presenting women. There are no hidden messages or ulterior motives or weird loopholes I'm trying to exploit when I say all this. I've repeatedly stated this. Nobody has any even remotely actually good reason to believe I'm lying or joking or exaggerating about anything. I'm really not. I know there's an election coming up in the United States, but I have no comments to make on that. And people trying to act like I'm trying to play around with words and involve myself in politics are conspiring against me. Like I've said, while I might say technically politically correct things sometimes or even often, I don't have any allegiance to any political party. Although I have extremely strong sexual desires towards Kimmy, and it should be extremely clear that I'm extremely serious about my feelings towards her and what kind of connection I've always been after having with her and how I'm going to act if it's really not going to happen in any actually reasonable manner, that is not, never has been, and never will be any kind of endorsement or agreement with any political affiliations that Kimmy or any of her associates or anyone else for that matter may or may not have. Since I don't really see Kimmy or any of her associates as even really politically involved, but politics have become an increasingly prominent thing I've had to deal with over time, I suppose I should address the only person significantly in politics that I have had some kind of actual experience dealing with in the past, since Hassan is just a massive bully, and I can't see how I can take him seriously in good faith. I noticed that recently, apparently Twitch is claiming Steven, known as Destiny, was banned off their platform for something rather different than what people were initially being told was the reason. I initially heard he was banned for his comments on transgendered people in competitive sports, and I'm pretty sure many people thought that was the case for a long time. I've never really cared much for sports, which is why I considered it largely irrelevant to me, and I largely ignored it. But now, apparently, this clip is why he actually got banned.
Your one-on-one voice trans debates lately have gone well. Don't cancel. It's just not worth it. That community is never worth engaging with. There's just no point in doing it. Like, it's too, the risk of me, like, ending up getting, like, permabanned and my life destroyed because of these, like, inbred fucking disgusting losers is, like, it's just not worth it. It's just totally not worth it.
This is, I'd say, actually much worse than Steven's pathetically inadequate take on transgendered people in competitive sports, and I'd say makes a lot more sense as warranting banning him off the platform, at least certainly when combined with what becomes a history of behavior that seems rather blatantly discriminatory or hateful towards transgendered people, particularly given Steven's otherwise typically rather well-researched and thought-through takes on things. To be both terrified of transgendered people destroying his career, but also look at them with such contempt as to literally call them as a whole inbred disgusting losers. This is beyond ridiculous. I'm actually starting to feel like Twitch intentionally hid this so I wouldn't realize I had some kind of grounds to find positive footing with Steven earlier and enable him to retaliate against what appears to be Hassan playing a large role in bullying him off Twitch. I've never wanted to get particularly into politics, but I feel like it really could have helped me avoid a lot of suffering if I knew I could force people to pay attention to the reality of what's been happening to me earlier that way, instead of having to deal with almost dying in real life, many times in all kinds of extremely painful and difficult situations, while dealing with all this stupid, petty drama with a bunch of Kimmy's friends that have done nothing but hurt me this whole time. Again, I am not, never was, and never will be at all romantically and or sexually interested in or pursuing Steven. If he had some issue thinking I was, he could have just contacted me long ago and asked or something, but he hasn't. I don't know or care if he has any kind of romantic and or sexual desires towards me, because that doesn't really matter to me, and it isn't going to change my position regardless, and he never had any actually good reason to believe otherwise. He really didn't have to trash on all transgendered people and call them inbred and refuse to engage with an entire group of people already inherently marginalized by society. To me, it seems both he was at fault and Twitch was at fault. They tried to cover it up by hiding things because they knew that would only add to my confusion and distress and make it as difficult as possible for me to try to figure things out and retain my sanity and survive through the massive smear campaign against me. Further evidence of Twitch having intentional involvement in being an accessory to conspiracy to murder me. That kind of behavior is what I'd say rather blatant, rather extreme transphobia from Steven. Sure, he might not have called transgendered people inherently subhuman or narcissistic or psychopaths, but given how well spoken he typically is, I believe it's plausible one can draw an implication he held such feelings of contempt towards transgendered people, despite his obviously careful reluctance to explicitly verbalize it. The fact that he blatantly acknowledged his own mental instability or somehow being in a faulty position to the extent he'd potentially lose his career as a direct result of how he deals with transgendered people, the discrimination and hatred he publicly displayed towards them is rather prominent. Since he had to even move off YouTube and take his content onto Kick, likely because of how extreme he wanted his takes to be able to get. I suppose his extremely well-concealed disregard for actually being a decent person extends far beyond simply how he handled me trying to bring to light the reality of the abuse I was facing at the hands of Kimmy and her associates, and perhaps even more so extremely toxic narcissist, psychopath, loser frauds I had in closer physical proximity to me from my past. Although it only shows me even more clearly that it's rather extremely unlikely Steven's attitude, or the attitude of Hassan or Twitch as a whole, is going to change towards me before it's too late and I seriously just have to destroy people's entire careers unapologetically, viciously, mercilessly, with absolutely no doubts or regrets or remorse or mercy whatsoever, absolutely unconditionally. How disappointing. I was never a huge fan of Steven, but I always had considerably more respect for him than Hassan or most other streamers. I saw him as more intelligent and emotionally balanced than probably most people in the world. And I still think he probably is, and definitely argues in good faith much more than a loser like Hassan. But I guess not enough for it to matter to save his career from how he wronged me. And Hassan's already doomed anyway, regardless, since I guess I'm just ultimately destroying the entire Twitch platform, and abusing it is how he's even able to be such a ridiculously disingenuous massive bully in the first place. I mean, I guess Steven could always try to redeem himself by being willing to bring attention to this conflict I'm exposing the truth of on this podcast now, if he cared to, I think it's pretty clear that Kimmy and her associates have no intention of actually communicating properly with me and giving me the relationship with Kimmy that I want and deserve peacefully, if ever. But I'm pretty sure Steven's just not going to particularly care about what I'm saying either, I guess, since he already demonstrated he hates transgendered people. I'm not going to deny my authentic feelings of my identity to appease a transphobic disappointment of a supposedly good faith debater. At this point, who knows how fake he's actually being, or if he feels I'm a fraud because of how convincing these liars slandering me constantly try to be to him to try to convince him I'm only going to make him look bad or get him in trouble or something if he helps me somehow. Either way, I guess the objectively sound reasoning I have to despise several highly influential figures only grows daily. They try to make me seem like I'm lazy or stupid or delusional or something for calling them out for doing extremely shady, screwed up things to me, as I'm literally homeless and eating out of the garbage to survive, as I'm regularly avoiding actual hitmen sent after me completely unjustly after I've been extremely brutally abused, betrayed, disrespected, and neglected by everyone that was ever really in my life at all. I guess Steven's really just another person on the list of degenerate, selfish pieces of trash that seriously hope I commit suicide or get murdered before I make something of myself that they really can't ignore even without needing any highly influential person's validation or support at all. Another person who's going to get serious damage to their life once I still succeed anyway, despite all the efforts to destroy my life for being, in reality, an exceptionally kind, sincere, hardworking person. You know, he probably might have even debated me or something if I cared to get into politics. But nah, that's not me. I've always only cared about talking about my takes in life because I was being authentic and I felt it was necessary to build something meaningful in an intimate, personal, heavily sexually involved relationship with Kimmy. But I should have already seen clear and serious results in such a connection if it was going to happen. Since that's not really a serious prospect to look forward to in a really meaningful and clear way anymore, then I'd much rather spend my time just constantly trying to attack and expose lies about me, even if nobody really seems to care, while doing video game development on the side and ensuring I'll grow a brand one way or another without any need for anyone's validation or support. And since so many highly influential people really seem to want to be my enemies, then this podcast will serve to ensure none of them think they can try to forcefully impose their help on me later after they've already been so unacceptably cruel to me. I don't want or need to rely on yapping or talking trash about people to make a living like so many trashy content creators do. And I'm never going to be a sellout. Like, I might call people subhuman, scum, and a bunch of harsh stuff for clearly, literally conspiring to murder me, but I'm effectively still treating them with way more respect than they're actually demonstrating worthiness of, and definitely way more than they ever gave me. I don't actually treat anyone like they're subhuman. Maybe I actually should start seeing some people that way and treating them that way when they insist on essentially siding with an extremely narcissistic, hateful, psychopath, racist, fraud, loser trying to start a business off acting like I'm a horrible romantic partner and trying to get me murdered off of lies when she never even dated me a day in her life. Or my racist biological relatives trying to influence me to hate Koreans and validate the horrible things they've been doing to sabotage my connection with Kimmy. But even now, I give Kimmy and her associates chance after chance to prove themselves somehow that they aren't absolutely awful, and yet they only prove they are more and more. I'm not trying to sabotage their personal or professional lives with lies or gatekeep a bunch of information or resources from them or get them murdered with lies or any of the extremely horrible kinds of things they've done to me for years. Me calling them mean things really isn't an indication of me being a bad person. It's just an expression of showing how awful what they've put me through and are still putting me through really is, and a reflection of how they, in reality, so extremely painfully clearly see me. Anyone trying to make me seem horrible for it is blatantly trying to massively twist and warp narratives to make me seem like a bad person for rightful anger that they've effectively left me with no other way to express with how extremely deeply wronged I rightfully feel for the extent of extreme abuse and literal crimes committed against me constantly for an extremely prolonged period of time completely unjustly because of people's jealousy and greed and selfishness and delusion and whatever mental illnesses they have. Despite all this, and that Stephen obviously sees this, he still basically sits back and laughs and expects me to engage or pick sides in his political rivalry with Hassan or whoever, when they both have been complete trash to me thus far and have both treated me like subhuman, worthless filth that deserves everything so awful I'm being subjected to. And that's politics. Garbage. Which is why I don't waste my time with it. Also, I see evidence to suggest that some massive creep, stalker, loser, maniac fraud is publicly harassing Hassan and obsessively watching his streams and making tons of alt accounts on Twitch to talk smack while supposedly being a huge fan or stalker or something like that of Emin. I've watched very little of Hassan's content in my entire life. I've literally never watched a single full stream of his. I certainly don't obsessively make accounts on Twitch to harass him or anyone else on the platform. I never have and never will. That's extremely pathetic, loserish behavior. Maybe you might see my feelings for Kimmy as pathetic or loserish somehow, because maybe you feel either I should have higher standards or my standards are delusionally high. But either way, I am, always have been, and always will be far above ridiculously petty and pathetic behavior like harassing a blatant bully obsessed with extremely disingenuous, bad faith political argumentation on the internet. That's like literally the epitome of irrational, mentally ill behavior. And again, I am not, never have been, and never will be romantically and or sexually interested in Hassan or Emin. I'm certainly not a stalker of Emin. Like I said, I'll call her out for extremely shady public behavior in a professional capacity like I do on this podcast, because I don't owe her anything, and I certainly don't want or need to have my life destroyed by her or her associates' lies about me. But beyond that, I couldn't care less about her existence. It's not love or hate, It's complete indifference. I couldn't be further from being a stalker or parasocial towards her. It's quite a ridiculously poor choice of slanderous targeting of false narratives about me as well, to suggest I'd stalk or have some kind of parasocial obsession with someone that blatantly, grossly disregards my extremely obvious sexual tastes. If anything, I feel Amin's been stalking me. Years ago, back when I had a Discord server that actually had a bit of a community in it, I once had this extremely strange person come into my server that spoke certain things implying a personal connection with Kimmy while not being Kimmy. Further dialogue from that person implied they were Emaine. Later on, I happened to see Emaine mention somewhere that she likes to poke at people who appear to have no insecurities, which, when I looked back at it, was exactly what that person's extremely strange behavior appeared to have been doing. They weren't a mere hater, they weren't a fan, and they weren't some aloof troll. It was someone seriously trying to test the strength of my mental framework. And why someone would attempt to do such a thing and try to give me false implications there remains rather unclear to me to this day. Like, having Amin's management email on my mailing list isn't stalking her. I've repeatedly stated that if anyone simply clearly contacts me to be removed from my mailing list, I'll do so with no questions asked. I've removed people that even asked rather rudely, so it's not even like I've ever given anyone any particular reason to believe you need to be especially respectful in asking. It's obviously preferred to be respectful, but I'm not trying to keep anyone on my mailing list that doesn't want to be part of it. I've literally said this repeatedly, and I've actually removed several people over time. Sometimes they didn't even ask, they were just rude to me in general, and I decided to remove them for that reason alone. Anyways, I have a lot I could go off about, but I'll save that for future releases. For now, I'll just end this release with addressing something Kimmy's recently said.
I mean, they are 100% handmade by me. I can drop some of I can scrape some skin flakes in the wax. No, I'm kidding. I'll mix some of my bath water into the candle. Oh my god. If you guys are interested in a handmade candle from me, then join my Discord, and I might make an announcement about potentially making them for people who would like to buy one from the community. Yeah, I think I will try communicating with you guys through Discord.
First of all, I'm certainly not incentivized to show interest in Kimmy's candles because she's scraping flakes of her skin or putting her bath water in candles. Whether or not that was a joke, that's really weird, and I've literally never said or done anything that should have ever gave anyone any kind of idea I'd want such things, or that it'd appease me or force me to shut up or change my position or offer anyone leverage over me or benefit me at all for Kimmy to do really strange stuff like that with her candle making. Like I've said, I have no want or need to ever buy candles from Kimmy, literally no matter what attributes they may possess. It doesn't matter even if she'd send them to me for free. They're useless to me. If she was going to treat me properly, she'd contact me practically begging to spend her life with me, not trying to sell me candles. If she isn't going to treat me properly, her candles aren't ever going to matter to me. Second, I've actually been in Kimmy's Discord server on my one and only Discord account for a long time. I even personally informed her mods of my presence long ago, and they know I'm there, and it's me, and I was not banned. I'm not there out of any interest in Kimmy's candles. I'm there to try to show her I'm serious and sincere about the position I'm maintaining on this podcast, and because I imagine contacting me through Discord is how she's likely to try reaching out to me if she does. But I refrain entirely from speaking in her server and have done so since the beginning of joining because it remains exceedingly unacceptably unclear to me how Kimmy really feels about me and whether or not she's willing to treat me properly. And I want it to be extremely clear that I have no ulterior motives and absolutely unconditionally no want, need, or willingness to be simply friends with her or let her force me into somehow unintentionally validating some kind of ulterior motive position that validates extremely false narratives her and her associates and others have been attempting to paint of me for many years. I guess technically this means there's a Discord server in existence that I'm in that Jamie is also in. But I'm not and never have been and never will be there for Jamie. I just wasn't going to leave Kimmy's Discord server because Jamie's in it. If Kimmy isn't going to speak to me and date me and love me and communicate properly and fairly and warmly and stuff, then I really don't care if I get banned from Kimmy's Discord server or not. I'm not interested in her candles either way, nor am I joining Jamie's Discord server or any of Kimmy's other associates' Discord servers. I have no want or need to if Kimmy's really going to be this way.